What is up, guys? It is the Bluebloods here coming at you Thursday, March 11th, man. And we have one topic today. Not a lot going on in college football. We'll have another episode coming out tomorrow that'll probably recap most of the stuff that happened this week. But man, there was something that went viral this week that I felt like we had to bring on the podcast, had to address here. I feel like it's a great way to get you guys interacting, get y'all's opinion out there so you can let us know what you guys think of this viral list that went out. And a lot of y'all know ESPN on their social media released a list of the 10 most exciting players of all time. They credited it to Tavon Austin. There is no proof that Tavon Austin made this list, but that's what they, I guess, deemed the list. So it's right now, guys. The list is as ESPN released it is 10. They have Jabril Peppers, defensive back slash hybrid type guy from Michigan, Michael Vick at Virginia Tech, Peter Warwick, Florida State, Braxton Miller at 7 from Ohio State, Lamar Jackson at 6, Money Johnny Manziel at 5, Christian McCaffrey at 4, Saquon Barkley from Penn State at 3, Tavon Austin, West Virginia at 2, and Reggie Bush, USC at number 1. Listen, I just want to say some of these are extremely valid, and I'll make my list to end the show. That way, you guys can share your opinion too. Let me know where I went wrong. But there's still some interesting choices here, I would have to say. I mean, all time may be a crazy statement about this list because Vic and Warwick are the only players to play before 2001. I mean, there's not a single player from the 80s, the 70s, the 60s, anything like that on this list. Vic played right at the end of the 90s. Warwick was right, I mean, not too far ahead of him. So we have no respect given to the many of decades of college football here. It really looks more of a list like someone like myself making a list of the most exciting players of my lifetime or of just recent history. It's kind of, I don't know where the cutoff is since Vic and Warwick are in the 90s. But, there's two players that kind of stand out to me as people I don't even see having an argument to be top 10. They're really good, but top 10 is a tough look, I would have to say. I mean, listen, uh, Braxton Miller, two-time Big Ten Player of the Year, but there's really only one or two highlights that really stick out for me there. And he's explosive, he's talented, but top 10, a huge stretch for me. While Jabril Peppers is a versatile athlete, but I ask you to give me one play in his career that really stands out in like college football lore or infamy or anything like that. Like he might be, I would say, one of the most versatile players, but this is explosive, exciting, things like that. And I don't think Jabril Peppers really lived up to that billing. He was very good, very touted out of high school, but outside of that, I'm not sure how he made the list. I know he's way down on it, but I probably wouldn't put him on my list. And, I can see an argument for everyone else, whether they're on my list or not. But I feel like there's some huge players missing from the list. And so I want to move on to my list here, man. We'll spend the rest of the short episode kind of looking at that. But, I want to start by saying I feel like it's unfair for me to put players that I didn't personally see play in my lifetime on the list. So I'm going to start it. I was born 1996. So I'm going to start it like 2001, 2002 and go from there. I think there are some honorable mentions I want to say before we start. I think Randy Moss, his Marshall career, he probably is going to be on the list of the most just exciting players of all time. I think you could put Michael Vick on that list. You see the jersey, one of the jerseys in the background is Michael Vick. Peter Warwick at Florida State, I like that pick. I think he could be on the list. I think Tommy Frazier from Nebraska, quarterback, would have a very strong argument there. I think Barry Sanders at running back would have a strong argument. I think Herschel Walker, Bo Jackson, both SEC running backs would have a strong argument. If you wanted to go way back, maybe like Billy Cannon or someone like that. I mean, it's kind of hard. I mean, Sims at Oklahoma would be an interesting one to pick as well. So I think those are some of the older players that I would probably say have an argument to be on this list, but I don't feel comfortable doing that. So I'm a stick with players that I saw play in my lifetime. And this is so let's get to number 10, man. Tavon Austin, West Virginia wide receiver slash athlete, did it all for the Mountaineers. He was an intricate part in continuing the offensive explosion we saw during the mid 2000s, which includes another player higher on my list. I mean, he averaged over 11 yards per attempt from scrimmage for his entire career. Tavon Austin could do it all. He was a big play threat anytime he had the ball in his hands, but I think there's players I would probably say belong just a little bit above him. I respect him. I think he belongs on this list, but he's going to go with 10 for me. In terms of next, this one's probably going to be a little bit controversial, but I'll stand by it. Darren McFadden, I think, deserves to be on this list. I think he's so overlooked because he played at Arkansas, but he was probably the second best player in college football behind Tim Tebow from 06 to 2007, made two back-to-back second-place finishes in the Heisman, probably got robbed by Troy Smith in 06. I think McFadden should have won that Heisman. Nobody should have beat Tebow. I get it. Tebow deserved that Heisman. McFadden was a close second right there. He had over 4,500 yards in his career, 43 touchdowns in only 3 years. Darren McFadden was arguably one of the best running backs in college football history. He dominated college football, put Arkansas at the forefront of the country for 3 years. He put Gus Malzahn on his trajectory to eventually become a coach. Bobby Petrino hit heights that he never would have accomplished without McFadden. McFadden was the second best player in the country those years and one of my favorite to watch, and it was so exciting to watch him play every single weekend. We're sticking with the running back position here, man. Christian McCaffrey dominated the Pac-12 for 2 years at Stanford, and I think he puts the definition of all-purpose into all-purpose, and he could do it all, which made him one of the most exciting running backs to watch. And he's continued that in the NFL. He could do it all on special teams. He can run. He could be a specialized pass person. He can do it all, man. And Christian McCaffrey is one of the best athletes that I think we've seen come through college football, and it makes him probably one of the most exciting players to watch in my lifetime. And we're going to get into some, I guess, players that I probably have a little bit of bias about, but I really think they deserve this. And number 7, Vince Young. And how do you keep Vince Young on this list when he arguably had the most exciting performance of all time in that Rose Bowl, man? That was one of the greatest performances of all time, the most exciting game of all time, if we're going to be completely honest. Vince Young against USC in that Rose Bowl was spectacular. That year was just spectacular for Young. He was one of the most explosive players in college football, and every time he was on the field, he was going to make something special happen, which leads me into number 6, right outside the top 5. This list would have been invalid immediately if I didn't have the man, the myth, the legend, Tim Tebow, Florida quarterback. And let's be honest here. Do I need to explain this? I mean, Tim Tebow was probably the most exciting thing to put on your TV screen while he was the starting quarterback for the Florida Gators. Two-time national champion, Heisman winner. He's probably the biggest national sensation since Reggie Bush when he was at USC. Probably might even top that. This guy was a superstar. He was exciting. Literally any single game the Florida Gators played was a must-watch game because of Tim Tebow. And this is going to be funny. So to get into my top 5, I do have another Florida player off that same team, and I think it's because of more of like what all-purpose he could do, and that's Percy Harvin. And I know most of y'all thought Tim Tebow would probably be the highest ranked Florida player from those mid 2000 teams that we saw. But man, without Harvin, I don't think that team runs. I think you saw more than an athlete with Brandon Marshall, Chad Ochocinco, Cam Newton. They were talking about how Percy Harvin was the most explosive, important player on those Florida teams. And I think he was. Averaged over 11 and a half yards per touch for his entire Florida career. He was a special teams fiend. He could step into some weird defensive stuff. He could do it running. He could do it passing. He could do it catching. I mean, it doesn't matter. Percy Harvin was an all-around athlete, explosive, and when Tim Tebow in this offense needed a play, they looked at Percy Harvin, which eventually made him a very early pick for the NFL. And this is going to be a pick that I don't think a lot of people are going to understand. I know I'm going to have to explain it. And listen, I'm going to beg you to go watch his highlights. Number 4, Pat White, West Virginia quarterback. Nobody puts any respect on this man's name, and he might be one of the most exciting, unique, athletic players of my generation that I've watched personally. West Virginia was a terrifying offensive team from 2006 to 2008, and Pat White was the driving force for a lot of those teams. He could absolutely take over any game by any means possible and was responsible for over 100 total touchdowns, and he created a lifetime of highlights every single weekend. There were weekends where he ran for 200 yards and 4 touchdowns. There were other weekends he threw for 400 yards and multiple touchdowns. Pat White could do it all. Every time he was in the shotgun, you thought Pat White could take it to the house. And if you don't agree with me, just go watch some of those highlights. You're on YouTube watching this right now. Go ahead, pause the video, go watch some Pat White highlights, and come back and comment in this comment section. Let me know, how am I wrong about this? Pat White was one of the most explosive, dynamic, exciting players I have ever watched play. And if you don't agree, you probably didn't catch enough West Virginia games from 2006 to 2008. Pat White belongs here. This one, I mean, this has to be on the list, man. This was another player I was shocked wasn't on there. Are we going to just ignore Cam Newton and what he did at Auburn in 2010? The greatest, most ridiculous season in college football history is what Newton did with Auburn after coming from Blaine Community College. And he took an average roster to the national championship, guys, while carrying a team with his arms, legs, physical size, and just dragging them through the season. Every single week on SportsCenter, you will see Cam Newton. His run against LSU will live on forever. His comeback against Alabama will live on forever. His over-the-top play against Arkansas, where they had to score 65 to get out of there with a win, will live forever. 200 yards against Kentucky to come out with that win. A huge pass to Terrell Zachary down the sideline against Clemson to pull off that overtime win. This is what we're talking about. To be the most exciting player, you have to have distinct highlights that define your career. Cam Newton put those up in 1 year, and he put up a 50-minute highlight reel that you could watch in just 14 games in his career. And so I think he belongs on this list. You can argue where he belongs on this list. I've really struggled putting Pat White below him. I almost had Pat White at 3. You can even put Percy Harvin up here. But Cam Newton belongs on this list. And 1 and 2 were the easiest picks for me. It was easy to order them too, guys. Johnny Manziel, Money Manziel at number 2, Texas A&M quarterback. Yes, he might not be a better quarterback than Tebow or Newton or Pat White. He was just so dynamic, so explosive, so exciting. I mean, guys, if you had to think of one word to describe Johnny Manziel, dynamic or interesting or exciting is the word you're going to get. Every single game you saw was exciting with Manziel. I mean, what can I tell you that you haven't seen yourself? He was the most explosive, exciting player from 2012 to 2013. He would escape pressure, guys, run around 100 yards, sideline to sideline, and then throw it 60 yards somewhere downfield to Mike Evans. That was the game plan for Johnny Manziel when stuff broke down. His play against Bama will live on forever, where he bumps into the offensive lineman, fumbles the ball, catches it, throws it to the back of the end zone, gets the upset win. That game will live on. The loss to Alabama the next year will live on. The Auburn game, 45-41, will live on. Johnny Manziel was a walking highlight reel, and some of the greatest, most exciting games in recent history can be contributed to Manziel, and he belongs in the top 2 of any list of any of the most exciting players in college football. And for number 1, there's one thing the list got right. Reggie Bush belongs number one. USC running back. That's the next jersey I want to add to my collection, man. This guy was my favorite player of my lifetime to watch. He was a threat to go to the house every single time he touched the ball, was a walking highlight reel. He averaged over 8 yards per touch throughout his career. And I mean, some of the greatest highlights of all time are from Reggie Bush running the ball. Dominated that game against Texas. It was just a little bit overshine because of Vince Young's comeback. His Fresno State run will live on. I mean, you just go watch Reggie Bush highlights on YouTube, and this dude was electric. He embodies everything it was to be exciting, to be explosive, to be dynamic. I mean, there's nothing more that I think I need to say about Reggie Bush and why he should be number one. He was the most explosive player in the entire country during his career, took home the Heisman, and everyone in the country was enamored with him. He was a superstar in LA. I mean, what else could you possibly want from this kid? He was everything and more. That's why he was the second pick in the draft. And this is why Reggie Bush, in my opinion, was the most exciting player of all time in college football. And that's what I'm going to go with. I pick players from my lifetime just to be fair, but I think Reggie Bush, Herschel Walker, Bo Jackson, all of them have great arguments in terms of why they should be there as well. My voice is escaping me tonight, guys, but I've had a lot of interviews coming up. But that is a wrap on this 2 minute drill. We went a little bit over time, but I wanted to get this topic in. Please let me know, guys, in the comment section who's too high, who's too low, who did I miss, and give me your top 5, top 10 of the most exciting players of all time in college football history. We can have this debate. So make sure to get the comment section bumping, get your opinion out there. And also, guys, go ahead, subscribe to the Bluebloods right now. Turn on your post notifications in the top right. That way you don't miss anything we post. Make sure to go to our Instagram, Twitter, all that. Follow us there. All our draft rankings are going up, and we're doing a huge mock draft this upcoming Sunday live stream on our Facebook, Periscope, and anywhere you can find the Bluebloods, and YouTube. So go ahead and check that out too. So make sure to subscribe now. We appreciate y'all tuning in. We'll be back right now. Up is our Michigan State Big 10 in 30 days with Stephen Brooks from 247 Sports. So go check that out. We have Penn State coming out tomorrow to wrap up the week. So make sure to check that one out too. Guys, for myself, for the Bluebloods, we will see y'all tomorrow with another 2 minute drill. But for right now, we are out.